Welcome to The Book of Life, a show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. In today's podcast, we meet author Sonia Levitin. Sonia Levitin has written over 40 books for children of all ages, many on Jewish themes. Her 1987 novel, The Return, tells the story of 12-year-old Desta, an Ethiopian Jewish girl who walks all the way to Sudan to take part in Operation Moses, the airlift that brought hundreds of Ethiopian Jews to Israel. After hearing last month's podcast about the Abba Yudaya, the Jews of Uganda, Sonia emailed to tell me about her new musical stage play based on The Return, a play which brings to life with music and dancing the plight of the Ethiopian Jews. I spoke to Sonia at her home in Southern California, where I interrupted her baking.
All right, in 10 minutes I've got to race down and pull something out of the oven, but I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
Well, if we're still talking, we'll just take a little break. What are you cooking?
Oh, I make a kind of like a berry cobbler for Shabbos.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah, I love it. And I put in, today I put in cranberry with strawberries and blueberries.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, too bad I'm too far away to eat any of that.
I was going to say, I wish you were coming.
Sonia, when you heard the podcast about Black History Month and the Abba Yudaya, your response was to email me, and this interview that we're doing now is actually your response to the last episode that you listened to. So I want to talk to you about the story of The Return. What was your inspiration for the story of The Return?
I got up one morning, and in the newspaper, there was this article in the LA Times about a secret rescue mission of Ethiopian Jews called Operation Moses. And I was absolutely stunned. It was like it was for me. It spoke to me. And I said to myself, my God, these people have escaped horrible conditions. They were the poorest of the poor, I remember it said. They'd been persecuted by the Marxist government. All they wanted to do was return to Israel, and they were following their prayers. So they took this terrible chance, and they walked from their villages. And they walked through jungles, and they walked past soldiers and bandits, and they were hungry. And finally they got to Sudan, to these refugee camps, which are horrible too. And even there they were persecuted and called Falasha. And then they were taken at night by bus, first to the airport, and finally, I think first they had to go through Europe and then to Israel. And the other thing that struck me was that 1,500 of these people were children who came without parents, and they walked all that way. Well, I said to myself, this is the story of the century. Every reporter, every novelist is going to converge and get this story. I want to write this story more than anything. So I decided to go to Israel. I had never been. I talked to everybody that I found, intake people, social workers, rabbis, people who ran the schools. And I wrote this book, and it was a really hard sell, too. My editor wanted me to write another school story and something rather bland, and I begged him. I said, let me write this. Well, ultimately I prevailed, and this book, when it came out, won 8 literary prizes, not only in America, but it won the German Catholic Bishop's Prize, which was totally rare. No Jew had ever won it. It's still in print now, and years ago, I realized I thought it would make a great musical.
I want to go back a little bit to learn more about the people that we're talking about here. So you learned about the Ethiopian Jews, and you used the word falasha.
Yes.
And I know that they're also referred to sometimes as the Beta Israel. Could you talk a little bit about these terms and who exactly these people are?
Yes. Beta Yisrael is their own name for their tribe, meaning House of Israel. And they live in a combination of cultures, Jewish and tribal African, as far as the customs are concerned. The name Falasha is a pejorative, and it is used by the other Africans against the African Jews, and it means stranger. And it's a terrible feeling of alienation that it brings to these people, and one of the reasons, of course, why they wanted to escape.
How did a Jewish population end up in Ethiopia in the first place?
There are many legends, but the predominant one that the Beta Yisrael themselves teach their children is that during King Solomon's reign, the monarchs from the known world all came to Jerusalem. So they say the Queen of Sheba, whose name was Makda, decided to get a caravan and cross the desert and go to see this famous king. And she brought gifts in her caravan for him, all the treasures of Ethiopia. And he fell in love with her when he saw her, which was not remarkable because they say he had at least 200 wives and concubines. And they have a legend about that, about the seduction, which he, of course, wanted her to be with him. And she said, no, I'm a queen, I have my dignity. And he said, all right, well, I'll make a bargain with you. He said, you are not to take anything that belongs to me from my palace. If you do, you're going to have to pay the forfeit and sleep with me. So, of course, she swore she would take nothing of his. He made a very, very spicy supper. In the night, after having eaten this supper, Makda went to bed and woke up with a raging thirst and ran to the well and took herself a dipper of water. Well, guess who was waiting there at the well? It was King Solomon himself, and he caught her. And the result of that night was a baby boy. When she left, she was pregnant. And he sent people with her to Ethiopia, and he said, let our child be the first Jewish monarch in Ethiopia. So a boy was born, Menelik, and he became the first king in a long line of Jewish kings who did rule there. They had their own land, they had their palaces, they taught Torah. That lasted quite a while. I think it sort of ended around our Renaissance. And then gradually the people were dispersed, the monarchs were defeated, and when the Marxist government came in the 70s, the remaining Jews were driven higher and higher up into the mountains where the land isn't so good, and they were forced to close down their schools. They were not allowed to teach Hebrew anymore. And that was when their priests, they're called priests or kets, sent a letter to whoever. It was like sending a letter in a bottle. Help us, we're a dying nation. They won't allow us to teach our children Hebrew anymore. And so that was really the main thrust that made them want to leave. It wasn't the poverty, it wasn't the famine, or even the persecution. It was that they realized that as Jews, African Jews, they would die out.
What is the current situation for Ethiopian Jews?
Since the Russian immigration came in, the Israelis felt very strapped to absorb so many that were often illiterate, that were impoverished, and that would need a lot of assistance. So there's been this debate back and forth. At the present time, I believe Israel is letting in something like 150 a month to emigrate. The conditions that they live in Ethiopia are desperate. If they're in the city of Addis Ababa, I've seen pictures of 10 people living in one in a one-room shack with one mattress where they take turns sleeping. Horrible, horrible conditions.
The Ethiopian Jews who have moved to Israel, how have they adapted to their new life?
Like any immigration, the older people have a harder time of it. They live all over Israel, what you would call here completely integrated. I mean, I've been in developments and communities, and it's, you know, the kids are and the adults are in each other's apartments and all over. So there doesn't seem to be the kind of racial problem that we have had here. There's intermarriage, less intermarriage between Sephardim and Ashkenazi than black and white, which I find kind of interesting.
Did learning about the Beta Yisrael affect your own Jewish identity in any way?
It really changed my life. It caused me to go to Israel to see them. I had, I guess, what you'd call an epiphany. I went to the wall, and I had not really studied Judaism at all because we were escapees from Nazi Germany, and when we came here, you know, everything kind of fell away. And when I went there to the wall, I just felt a tremendous connection. And when I came home, I decided to learn. So this, yes, and it all started with doing the return and seeing those Jews who were so impoverished and just walking all the way to Israel so that they could recapture and keep their Judaism.
Your play, Return, is based on your 1987 book, The Return, which was a winner of the Sidney Taylor Book Award and the National Jewish Book Award, among various other awards. What was the path that brought the story from book format to musical stage production?
Well, I had been thinking about The Return as a musical. There was one scene in it that was a picture in my mind. A group of kids capture this little boy on his way to school. He's a Jewish little boy. And they start to taunt him. In Africa, children, from the time they're about 12 or so, it's like a puberty thing, the boys start walking around with sticks. You've probably seen pictures of Africans. They have this big walking stick. Well, they start with these sticks in the book, and they're just waving them and taunting him, and very quickly it turns to violence. And they catch him and they beat him on the soles of his feet with sticks. And it's terrifying. And I, for some reason, imagined this as a dance. And to me, the motif was how any ordinary object can be quickly turned into a tool of violence when you have that bad intent. And it says in the book the children had learned it from their elders, because that was the torture punishment that the government invokes.
So tell me, what has been the one best thing about seeing your book turn into a musical play?
Oh, working with those black actors, seeing how they love the show, how important they think it is. They had no clue about Ethiopian Jews. Being able to write words that for me and for them had great meaning. Words about leaving your home, words about being free, about what's important. One of the songs is, "We heard that strangers are people to fear." It's a song sung by Desta, the black girl, and her little sister with a Muslim family that they meet on the road, and they're terrified of each other. And they share a meal. Desta gives them her necklace to trade for food because they won't allow her to buy the food. They stone them and injure them when she goes to a farmhouse. But she says, "You can go. You can get food." And he says, "You would trust me with this treasure?" And she says, "Yes." So the father goes and gets some food, and they all sit down together, the father, mother, and the little boy, and Desta and her little sister, and they share this meal. And then they sing this absolutely wonderful song. "We heard that strangers are people to fear, but they're not. Come close, draw near." That experience, being able to see that enacted on the stage, is just fabulous.
Tell us about the Once Upon a World Book Award, what it is and why you created it.
My husband and I were feeling that so many of the books in Jewish theme, especially for young people, were quite grim and sad, and we wanted to see more books that had important meaning and that were nurturing to the readers, not only in Jewish area, but all around. So I approached my friend Adair Klein at the Wiesenthal Center, and I told her we would like to make an award to encourage that kind of writing, and she loved it. This award is for the book that best expresses tolerance, and we did it first for a book for children between the ages of 6 and 10, and it's $1,000 to the author. And this last year we added another award for a young adult book because we felt it was too limited. So we added another $1,000. So we have had all different ones. We've had one that was about the Japanese internment, the one about Hawaii last year, and this young boy who was an incredible surfer, and he was the first Hawaiian who ever got to the Olympics, first Asian person. The very first one was about getting the right to vote in South Africa for blacks.
Sonia, what are you working on next?
3 things. The one I'm working on now deals with 2 sisters. One has a liver transplant, and she abuses and ruins it. And the family expects her younger sister to donate a piece of her liver. She doesn't want to.
Huh.
The ultimate meaning is the importance of life and how it's never to be taken or given lightly. The other book I'm working on is called Inscribed in Stone, and it deals with the Babylonian captivity and the release of the Jews by Cyrus and the opportunity to go back and rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And it's about a family that has completely integrated into life in Babylon. The mother of the family is a convert. She was an idol worshiper. So there's a lot of tension and stress. The girl goes for the first time into the glitter that is Babylon. So in my story, ultimately, she is going to have her epiphany and go back to Jerusalem to help rebuild the temple. But in the meantime, she's been exposed to everything that is so exciting about Babylon. To me, it's a parallel to the way we're living now. The third is a science fiction book. It's kind of a Faustian thing. He lives in a time where everything is oriented towards science and technology, and they just don't value the arts. The boy is willing to trade some of his artistic abilities if only he can be smarter and win the prizes at school. Everybody's into prizes and awards and trophies. You know, it's kind of common on what I see around me, like this American Idol mentality. So he wants to be better, and he's willing to trade a piece of his brain for some of the robot brain so that he can be number one. And so he's willing, in a way, to sell his soul.
Sonia Levitin, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Oh, it was great. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for the opportunity.
You can watch a scene from the play Return at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of Congregation B'nai Israel of Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries, online at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilachmakers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Visit our podcast website at bookoflifepodcast.com or listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. We welcome your comments and questions at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.